you.
Okay, I appreciate that.
Because Joseph, on your right, is playing basically your deck.
Yeah,
a deck that you popularized.
It looks like he's been reading my articles and maybe following me over on Twitter. I've been tweeting nonstop about this Nexus of Gates deck.
Which is why I unfollowed you, actually.
Right, I know. You'll come back someday. They all do. So, yeah, we have Joseph Cockrel on Nexus of Gates, and we have Luke Bishop, who's playing Bant Nexus. So more Nexuses, just completely loaded with Nexuses in our feature match area. Another card I completely love. So it'll be interesting to see how these two decks interact with each other. You know, I've played a lot with Nexus of Gates. Matchups are weird. They're kind of like speed-based. One player wants to play the combo side of things. So let's see what we have. We have Joseph Cockrel leading with, surprise, a tap land.
Weird. And actually, Luke's deck is just blue-green in Nexus. He's Simic.
Oh, so we have no Bant here. Interesting. I've seen that take around. People are giving up on Teferi, saying it's not what I need in my deck, and instead just leaning hard on the blue-green cards.
You know, if you have Wilderness Reclamation, the things that pay you are the instants. Chemister's Insight, Precognitive Perception, even Expansion Explosion, things like Blink of an Eye. You don't really need Teferi.
My own work with Nexus decks, I've found myself moving more and more away from Teferi. So we have Joseph Cockrel playing a Growth Spiral here, looking to accelerate his mana as well as draw some cards. Luke Bishop had an opt on his last turn, setting up, trying to find the quickest Nexus endgame he possibly can.
2 gates, off to a good start.
Got him out early. I mean, that's the key, right? You don't mind a gate on turn 1 and 2 all that much. When you're really desperate to hit that 7th land drop to play Nexus, the gate can be extremely punishing. But it looks like Joseph has found additional ways to accelerate with a Gate of Paradise. Or excuse me, Gift of Paradise. I have gates on the brain.
They're not all gifts, man. Or they're not all gates.
I wish they all could be. So Joseph Cockrel going to rise up to 23 life. Life total's not likely to matter at all in this matchup. We can basically treat them as non-entities because this is about taking all the turns, generating mana, and getting to your Nexus of Fate endgame.
Right. The games will eventually be decided by damage, but in large, large chunks. Correct. Possibly infinite chunks.
Yeah, could be.
So when you were building this deck, do you think that it has an edge against the control matchups or like the other Nexus decks? Like, I honestly don't even know.
I think you gain a huge edge from people not quite understanding how to play against this deck yet. As far as the other Nexus matchups, you tend to have a little bit more ramp than they do and move a little bit faster. Cool. So I do think you're favored there as well. We see a Gateway Angel on Joseph Cockrell's side of the board, gaining a bit of life, starting to pose a threat. And over on Luke Bishop's side, there's the key card. It's a Wilderness Reclamation. Not as much mana on Luke's side of the board, though. Maybe not able to leverage that Wilderness Reclamation as much as he might like.
So Joseph is definitely out in front with 2 ramp spells, but Luke's Wilderness Reclamation could potentially just do a lot of work.
Oh, and here is a huge spell out of Luke Bishop, cast in his main phase. This is Precognitive Premonition. Do I have that right?
Precognitive Perception.
Perception, thank you very much. This is a spell letting him draw 3 cards as well as a scry 3. But Joseph Cockrel has a response of his own. He's got a Nexus of Fate. That means he's going to be taking the next 2 turns of the game, and we'll see what he can set up in those 2 turns.
Yeah, it's interesting timing. Obviously, you don't want your Nexus to get countered, your big 7-mana investment, but now this gives Luke a little bit more information for what's going to happen, where he gets to make those scries with a little bit of added information and will know to pass the turn while probably not doing stuff in his end step.
Right, and we know that Luke is going to get to untap in the end step. It's not like you're really getting all that much of a mana advantage here by playing at instant speed. Although, in fairness, Joseph Cockrel has no clue what's in Luke's deck. He could be facing a handful of counterspells, so maybe he just felt this was the spot, but he'd still have a window before Wilderness Reclamation would untap that he could resolve the Nexus.
It looks like Luke did not use the Wilderness Reclamation.
Correct. He has remained tapped here. Unlikely he had an effect anyway, but not what you want to give away to your opponent here.
Yeah, I mean, if you're Joseph, you know that the shields are down. You have 2 turns. You can just try and do your worst, but it doesn't look like he has much going on with 2 copies of Gates Ablaze in hand.
Looking at Joseph's hand, it's actually quite weak. Gates Ablaze, incredible when facing down those aggro decks. Doing absolutely nothing here. Stone nothing. And he's going to follow that with Plaza of Harmony, going up to 29 irrelevant life. So not the cards you want to see against the Nexus Mirror here. Kind of some classic mid-range problem, drawing the wrong half of the deck at the wrong time.
For sure.
So here we see a second copy of Wilderness Reclamation join Luke Bishop's side. That is going to give access to tremendous amounts of mana as we move on to his end step.
So starting off by floating 2, resolve the first Wilderness Reclamation.
It's a Nexus of Fate.
Up to 7 mana, so 1 extra turn coming, 1 Wilderness Reclamation trigger coming.
Did you ever think the turn counter would be something we would see in Standard? What a bizarre addition to the world of Standard, where we have to track the number of extra turns that players have put in the bank.
I would prefer that it just didn't exist. It's like, why would that even cross my mind as a thing that we might need at some point, right?
Nexus of Fate is a strange and wild card, I will say that. So going back to Luke Bishop, we have the important Arch of Orzhaka entering the battlefield. Still 1 permanent short, I believe. That'll be key with 2 Wilderness Reclamations sitting on the battlefield. And there you see Hydroid Crassus. They're big in this deck. I believe we are looking at 1 for 4 here. Is that correct?
Yeah, 2 cards coming, 2 life.
Uh-oh, another Nexus of Fate. You know what that means when we get to the untap step. And we also now have an active Arch of Orzhaka, which is going to be drawing more and more and more cards.
Reclamation triggers, 2.
Smart. He missed that last one. Good to get on top of it.
So floating 1 mana, using the first Reclamation to make 6, cast that Nexus of Fate. Still 1 Reclamation trigger coming, so 8 potential mana. Maybe just going to be a card from Arch of Orzhaka, but either way, these Wilderness Reclamations are definitely doing work.
Oh, yeah. You see just how powerful this card is when left unchecked. And it scales in multiples as well.
Is there anything sweeter than having a Hydroid Crassus be the card that turns on your city's blessing, like finally allows you to ascend?
Feels great, man. I'll say that. And we did see another Nexus of Fate come off the top of Luke's deck. That means that Hydroid Crassus is probably going to start going to work on Joseph's life total here. I mean, I guess in some ways the life totals are relevant. He has to find more Nexus of Fates than he previously would have, but we've got another Hydroid Crassus joining the party. This one is for 6 instead, drawing 3 cards, gaining 3 life. Nexus of Fate already in hand. Joseph's Gates may not be long for this world. Keeping track of those Reclamation triggers, using some mana here. And it's Nexus of Fate, one more time.
Yeah, this is just one of the things where it's like the Gates deck, you play all this spot removal, you need this life gain from the Angel and the plazas and stuff. But realistically, if you just build a streamlined Simic version, is that actually going to be that much worse?
I think it's matchup dependent, but as far as the operating procedure of taking all the turns with Nexus of Fate, I understand what you're saying. Keep it clean, keep it simple, and Luke Bishop did exactly that in that game 1. So why don't we head over to these sideboards now, take a look at what both players are going to be offering. Over on Luke Bishop's side with Simic Nexus, he has 4 Negate, 4 Diamond Mare, 3 Carnage Tyrant, 2 Spell Pierce, 1 Crushing Canopy, and 1 Naturalize. Jerry, what are you bringing in here?
Not the Diamond Mares. Everything else is basically up for debate. You have Carnage Tyrant to be this big threat that is also uncounterable. Crushing Canopy, Naturalize can interact against the various accelerators out of the Gate stack, and then Negate and Spell Pierce, you just have to be able to force through your Nexuses, your important cards, and also stop them from doing their thing.
Right, and over on Joseph's side, we have somewhat of a similar looking sideboard. Things are a little different here. We have 4 Negate, 2 Archway Angels, 2 Gatebreaker Ram, the big Ram coming to the party, 2 more Hydroid Crassus, 2 Cindervines, 2 Mass Manipulations, and 1 Crushing Canopy. Jerry, what do you like from Joseph Cockrel?
Same kind of deal, Hydroid Crassus, just giving you this win condition that's hard to interact with. Gatebreaker Ram is cheap. I definitely like having access to something like that rather than Carnage Tyrant in this matchup, because you can play it and still have counter mana open to stop what they're doing. And then definitely the Negates, the Cindervines look incredible, because if Luke can't remove them, he could potentially just die to them.
Correct.
Although I guess it's maybe pretty easy for Hydroid Crassus to just outmode it and go over the top of it.
Yeah, Cindervines, when it's not backed up by any pressure, has some issues. You want to be pressuring your opponent's life total to get the maximum value out of the card. But still, important removal for Wilderness Reclamation, certainly something you want to have access to. So if you, like me, are dying to play with this Gates deck, you know where you have to go. Take it to SCG Game Night. Every week in January, they'll be giving out exclusive tokens and sleeves. January, per Dukin.
I need to get some of those this weekend.
Those are
Don't
dope.
let me forget.
Those are real dope. You take a look at February. We have our exclusive offering, Yeti Steady Go. Also like that one. I love all these creature collections. This is a really nice look for the back of your deck. And finally, when we get to March, we're looking at Vini Vidi Armadici. More tokens, more sleeves. If you want more information on game night, be sure to check out go.starcitygames.com/game night.
Which one is your favorite out of the three?
I got to go with Perdukin.
Yeah.
I'm a big Street Fighter fan, Street Fighter player. They were just really cute, too. I mean, cute kittens. Come on.
I'm a big kitten fan.
Right. Yeah.
Hadokens are okay, but
I would lean more towards the Hadouken side of things. I am a dog person, although I love all animals. So kittens certainly, a quality animal. But you combine them with Street Fighter, and I'm sold 100%.
absolutely.
So players shuffling up here for Game 2 of Simic Nexus versus Nexus of Gates. Do you think anyone has an edge going into the post-sideboard games?
I think Joseph definitely gets more upgrades than Luke does, the gate side of things, but Joseph also has more dead cards that he has to get rid of. So it's kind of tough. I think it mostly just brings him back to even-ish.
Okay. I think there's a lot of spells you want to get out of your deck here. The more options you have in your sideboard, really the better served you're going to be. So it'll be interesting to see if Luke can bring in all the spells we identified, have enough non-engine cards. Obviously, Luke is able to remove things like Root Snare, possibly Blink of an Eye. All those are options. And if you want to know what are in our players' decks, don't forget to check out that Cardboard Live extension right there on your screen if you're watching on twitch.tv. You take a click over in the corner, the deck list will pop out. Look at the sideboards. This is one of the coolest things we've added to coverage in a very, very long time.
Yeah, one of the best quality of life improvements by far.
For sure. So it looks like the players are looking at their opening hands now, evaluating them. Red Joseph's lips. He's mulliganing. He's putting his 7 back, looking for a better 6. Looks like Luke is satisfied and is going to be sitting on 7.
It's tough to not be satisfied with a deck this clean. You have just 8 dual lands, Memorial to Genius to also just be a nice little value land add.
Great add to this deck.
1 Arch of Araska, and some basics. Then you have things like Opt and Growth Spiral to fix your draws early, search for Iskanta. The deck is just so clean.
Yeah. Yeah, I love Memorial to Genius. Anything you can do with your mana base. So obviously Gates is taking a different approach and trying to stabilize their life total via their mana base. This deck is trying to stabilize its draw engine and ensure once it starts going off of Wilderness Reclamation, it's not going to fizzle. It's going to find its Nexus of Fates.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people found Arch of Araska. That one's pretty easy, right? As the game goes on, you normally end up with an extra Wilderness Reclamation trigger that you don't necessarily need, so then Arch just translates that into an extra card. But don't forget about Memorial. Memorial is also just very, very good.
Totally agree with you. So it looks like Disaster has struck our Gates player. Jerry, I'm sure you're cackling with delight over there. Joseph has mulligan to 5 here. Hopefully can find a presentable 5 as he looks through his cards.
Yeah, it's too bad. I'm curious if it was, I don't have the right colors of mana, or maybe this hand doesn't do anything. I don't have any way to stop Wilderness Reclamation. But I would definitely put Gates on the side of a little bit more inconsistent than straight Simic, but not as much to just mull to 5,
Right. Yeah, I mean, you pay a cost extending your mana base that far. This is a 4-color deck, essentially, with a lot of tap lands, and it can be tough, especially in mulligan games, to find the right pieces of mana. So both players just playing lands. Joseph with a Forest and a Gate. Luke Bishop, Breeding Pool, and Forest.
The good thing, though, is you probably, you're a resource-based kind of combo deck, but realistically, if you have 4 lands, Wilderness Reclamation, and a card drawer, you're kind of off to the races anyway.
And we see Joseph Cockrel attempt to resolve a Cindervines there. Luke Bishop says absolutely not. Negated. Joseph having a hard time hitting land drops, but it looks like Luke may have missed his 4th drop as well.
Yep.
Yeah, so both players having a difficult time with their mana right now. And as a player who had to mulligan, this is what you love to see. We just saw Luke discard 2 hand size, in some ways invalidating that starting advantage in cards he was holding.
We're getting back to even here. I mean, Joseph still has a lot of work to do as far as his mana is concerned. He only has red and green mana available, which I'm sure is not ideal.
Right. There we see a tapped Simic Guildgate, getting back to a more even mana distribution, some more colors. But Luke has found fourth land and used it to Chemist's Insight, which has led to fifth land, happens to be Arch, and we see a search for Azcanta, which is going to lead to more lands, things starting to shift to Luke's side.
Yeah, it didn't take much to just, get him super far ahead there. It was really just the fourth land that he needed. Chemist's Insight kind of just delivered it all.
For sure. And we see Joseph has now found a fourth land. He's going to play it in the form of an untapped breeding pool, considering options here.
It's dangerous here in these spots. Your opponent has shown you a negate. They have mana open. They could potentially do busted things themselves. So, do you tap out to try and get ahead, especially when you're slightly behind?
It's a tough call. It's tough to win the game just sitting there. Joseph needs to advance his position in some way, and just passing the turn here, looks like that's what he's choosing to do, but it's dangerous.
So your Gates deck also has Expansion Explosion in it, correct?
That is correct.
What
yes.
is the coolest thing that you've gotten to Expansion?
I mean, Expansion, I love it when it's doing the things you wouldn't expect to be great, like, say, a Growth Spiral. Obviously, it's super flashy to be able to Expansion counter magic or, some tremendous spell for your opponent. I appreciate the little nuanced usages of Expansion and getting little bits of value here and there. And I think that's what can separate a really effective pilot of this deck from one who might struggle a little bit more.
Fair enough.
We again see Joseph attempt to resolve Cindervines. Again, Luke Bishop says absolutely not dealing with that card. And Luke's hand starting to look a little full over there. He has resolved Wilderness Reclamation. Nexus of Fate is in hand. Search for Azcanta is on the battlefield. Joseph does not have much time at this point.
Yeah, 6 cards in the graveyard to Luke electing to keep the Wilderness Reclamation rather than transform the Search. Just knowing that he's super far ahead, and that is the one piece of the puzzle left. That's all he needs to actually just jumpstart and get to the final part of the combo.
Right. Looks like we're going to see an end-step Chemist's Insight here. And there's one of those value uses of Expansion Explosion. We see a copy of the Chemist's Insight from Joseph Cockrel.
It's not bad. Still has a lot of work to do trying to get even up to parity against Luke, and a quick little draw too is a good way to try and close that gap, but having the mana advantage between Search and Wilderness Reclamation, and now probably the Arch is going to be online, if not now, very soon.
Luke working through his turn right now, thinking about, can I maximize this Nexus of Fate? And if you saw Joseph Cockrel, he also discarded a Nexus of Fate there. His was a proxied one. Obviously, Nexus of Fate only available in foil copies. If your copies warp, judges will issue you proxy copies of Nexus of Fate. One of the many interesting quirks, shall we say, of Nexus of Fate.
Yeah. It is weird. I don't normally play with foils, so I would have to have proxies, but obviously if you have a bunch of foils in your deck, no big deal.
Yeah, very few cards in Magic are you able to get non-foil replacement for your foils, only if they are not available in a non-foil form. And Nexus of Fate checks that box. So we're seeing a lot of mana here from Joseph Cockrel. You know what that means. Misses Hydroid Crassus entering the battlefield. We started calling Hydroid Crassus by very respectful terms over on our podcast because it is so dominant, so deserving of our respect. We also often call it Mr. Crassus or Mrs. Crassus.
It deserves something, It should be knighted or your eminence, your grace, something like that.
All of those are appropriate, and honestly, that's enough for Joseph Cockrel. He has bowed to the wills of Mrs. Crassus as she asserts her presence on the battlefield.